So, so I always refrain from talking about business, talking about my business history and all of that. But I got a message from somebody on Instagram. They asked me like, what happened to your tech startup? You never talk about it. And I've even had people close to me, right? They're like, why don't you ever talk about business? I just never feel like I've succeeded enough to be able to talk to you guys about the business stuff, right? But then I started realizing that the failures that I have can actually be turned into lessons for other people so that they don't make those same mistakes. So that's what this video is going to be about, man. I'm going to really break down my entire tech journey, like of building that company, from the beginning, from ideation, from when I started with the idea to when I shut down the company, right? And all of this is public information. If you look up the company Soko and type in my first and last name, you'll find everything you need to know on it. You'll find the history of it. You'll find the investors that I had and all that type of stuff. But anyway, I want to get started with what this story was, because honestly, this was something that changed the entire course of how I looked at business. You know, when I was first in college, I always wanted to be a tech entrepreneur. I always wanted to be like the Mark Zuckerberg. Tech startups was a big thing. I went to a pretty quote unquote prestigious university or college, private college called Babson College, and it's a business school. Everybody was starting businesses. You know, people were on Shark Tank around me, and I was the athlete, right? But, you know, I always wanted to get into technology. I ended up going to Silicon Valley for a semester abroad, but I ended up doing some consulting for a tech company called ClassPass. You probably heard of them. I did go-to-market strategy for them, which basically meant that, you know, I was with a team and we were helping them basically get into business to business. So selling to other businesses, they usually sold to consumer. We were helping them basically get their first business contract with Google. We ended up helping them land Google, built a whole prototype for them that they iterated on, and they're using a different version of that. But, you know, that opened me up to Silicon Valley, the tech scene, and I saw all these tech billionaires, and I'm like, tech is the way to go. Tech, building a company, building a startup is how I'm gonna be one of the richest people ever, right? And for context, I got into technology because of ego. I was always a fitness guy. I always loved fitness. And I was a trainer as well when I was in school. That's where I started. That's a whole nother story. But so that you understand, I got into fitness for a different reason. I got into fitness because I really liked it, right? I needed an outlet from when I stopped playing basketball in college, right before the season started, to being competitive. And the gym was where I could compete with myself. So that's what I did. But I got into technology because of ego. I wanted people to believe that I was smart. I wanted people to know that I was capable. I was intellectually capable, because the persona that I had, right? Everyone just thought I was like this jock, like idiot that walked around and, you know, I read a lot, man. I was a very literate person. I was very well-mannered. I spoke very well. I've always had that, but I always felt inadequate because I didn't do the big things that other people were doing. When people would ask me, what are you? And I'd say, oh, I train people. I'd always see people's eyes just kind of be like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then I saw other people, when they would say they were building companies, everyone would light up. So I really got into tech for ego, just so you know. But anyway, long story short, I ended up working for a tech company after I graduated. I stopped my personal training company. I had a girl at the time, and she was pushing me to get into corporate, because you know how it is, especially back then, entrepreneurship was not cool, right? Entrepreneurship was kind of taboo, and people weren't really into it. People thought that you were kind of like lame and broke, and yeah, you're broke for the most part if you're an entrepreneur for a lot of the time until you break through. But I wanted to just get into tech, right? I wanted to learn. So I ended up going to work for an IT software company, and I did a lot of business development for them. So helping them generate leads. I would help them with the deals that they were closing and things like that. I'd learn a lot more about sales in that process. I learned a lot through software sales. I learned a ton, right? So during that time, I remember I was always admiring people who were, you know, in Silicon Valley. They were raising millions and millions of dollars. I was like, I want to be that person. I want to be the next black Mark Zuckerberg. I remember telling myself that, and I was like, I'm going to be the next black Mark Zuckerberg. And there was an opportunity that came up that I noticed with minorities trying to get recruited into tech companies. There was a shortage of minorities in tech companies. I even looked at my tech company, and there was 6 of us, and we needed more people, right? So I asked my VP of sales, I was like, how do we get more like black people or just minorities in the company. And she didn't really know. She was trying to figure it out. And so I decided, I was like, man, I want to start like a project. I want to actually build a tech company. What if I built a social network for black professionals? I'd be the black Mark Zuckerberg, because Mark Zuckerberg built a social network, so I can do the same thing. Literally, very naive. But I ended up building a pretty good audience on Twitter because I would always put out blogs around tech, because I was super into this idea of being in tech and being a leader in tech. And it gave me a level of sophistication. You know, it was interesting, the ego and trying to, you know, boost my status with this. Like, it was so interesting how I went about it. But doing that made me learn so much so fast, because I'm a fast learner. So I was learning so many different terms around tech. I was learning so many different things about the startup world and everything like that. And I decided to put this idea out there on Twitter, and I got a ton of support. I got more support than I've ever gotten on anything that I've ever posted on Twitter. Started getting people reaching out to me, right? People wanted to join. I started trying to recruit people that I knew, engineers that I knew, to try to help me build this app, this social network for black professionals. I put this whole mission together. Man, I was into branding. I was into like all of this stuff that I'm teaching people in my personal branding coaching and everything. Like, I was doing that stuff so early, and it helped me a lot, man. And my physique helped so much too. I didn't realize it. But people genuinely gravitated towards me, and people wanted to work with me for equity. I was learning more about trading equity versus cash because I didn't have that much money. I had money saved, but I didn't want to spend it on a team, right? That would be very expensive, and I didn't raise any money. So I built this team around me of like people who were legitimate software engineers, product managers at really big companies. You know, I built this team to build this social network for black professionals. I was building. With them, we started off, first I made this like crazy just like website that basically was like a clone of Fiverr, right? For companies to be able to hire talent. And people saw that, people engaged, people were supporting, and I got to a point, man, where I really wanted to take it to the next level. And I quit my job. I remember I quit my job. I actually quit my job not for tech, but because I was supposed to be on Love Island. So I was auditioning for Love Island, and I didn't end up making it. I got out on the last round, but like basically I had this tech company that I was like, okay, when I come back, I'm gonna do it once I get in, because I thought I was gonna get into Love Island. Long story short, it didn't work out. I ended up seeing the tech company, and I was like, okay, I wanna go all in on this, right? Because I think this is gonna blow up. Like, I really have a strong idea that this is gonna blow up. So I scrap everything, I leave the job, I have some savings. I probably had about 40 grand worth of savings to be able to play around with. And I was like, okay, this is gonna get me, I'm gonna raise some money now, because I went to Babson College. I know people with money, so I know investors are gonna like it. Little did I know, it's a lot more complicated than that. It was really hard for me to raise money for this concept because, one, the total market of what I was getting into was small, right? Total market of black professionals in America. I mean, how big can you scale? And I started to realize that venture capitalists, they want like billions, multi-billions of dollars worth of value from what they invest in. And if they can't see it, they're not gonna invest. So I took it personal, man. I used to always think like, man, why are these people not investing in me? They're investing in so-and-so. And I didn't realize it was also all about networking, right? Finding the right network. That's a big lesson. Like, build your network, because that'll give you opportunities that you've never seen before. But anyway, I ended up trying to build this tech company with this team, man. And, you know, people are leaving because it's not working the way that they wanted to. It's not moving as fast as they wanted it to. I'm getting people who are upset because they want more equity, and I have to deal with that. And I start finding mentors to be able to help me with the equity ideas and figuring out, okay, how much equity should I really give to people as a CEO? And it just ended up not going well. Like, I just felt like I was just wasting time. But then everybody around me was hyping me up, because this idea of building a tech company, and it was this grandiose thing. Most people see it as this grandiose thing that you're doing, like you're changing the world, you're building a tech company. Like, most people can't build a tech company. And like, for me, I let that get to my head, and it forced me to keep going, which was a good thing. But, you know, I got to a point where I was just struggling, man. I was struggling to get investment. So I had to pivot the idea because I'm really good at pivoting, right? And I pivoted the idea to just a talent marketplace where people could companies could hire talent through other people's personal networks. So anybody could go on there and basically be micro recruiters and like recruit their friends to go join these tech companies. They'd get paid 10% of their total salary because recruiters were taking 20%, and then we would get paid like the transaction fee on the marketplace. It was a whole thing that we did that I came up with that like it was genius, right? It's still, I believe, is a genius idea. I just didn't have the passion for recruiting. I didn't like it, but I kept going with it because it kept the vision moving. It kept the vision of building a tech company moving, right? So I'm at a point where I'm with this team. The people who dropped off, they dropped off. I had one person come back and try to basically ask for money. They were like, hey, you owe me X amount of money because they thought that the company was doing well because it was getting paid. And I'm like, I mean, we haven't made any money. I haven't made any money. I've spent money, if anything. So it's another thing, dealing with people and dealing with people's expectations. Setting expectations is very important. That's one thing in business you have to know. You have to set expectations for people clear from the beginning. They have to know what they're getting. They have to know what they're getting themselves into. They have to know that it is a longer term play. It is a long game. If people don't know that and they're coming in to get rich fast and they want to just start doing all these things, you're going to have issues with people, right? And you may get future lawsuits. You never know, right? I was always scared about that. I'm like, man, what if that person like sues me? Like I didn't, we signed a contract, but the contract was like future equity in the future for a certain period of time. They had to stay there, but I let them go early because they just weren't a good fit for the team. At that time, I had about 2 people that were on my team. So anyway, long story short, we're building. And so the engineer, he's building, and he's really good at what he does, right? He builds this iOS app that we have that we launch. And it starts picking up, man. People, we start to see progress. We start to see things. And I get to a point where I'm reaching out to people in my network and I'm starting to get angel investors. People are putting 10K, 20K, and we're starting to get money, right? Coming in. And at this point, I ran out of all my money. So I needed some money to sustain. So luckily I was able to use some of that investment, and the team agreed that I could use it to be able to sustain and just live at the bare minimum, be able to afford just my rent really was what I needed, and food. Wasn't going anywhere, and we had the money to be able to go to different places, go to different conferences and stuff, and network and stuff like that. But then we got to a point, man, where we weren't getting investments like that, and we were trying to figure out, okay, how do we get this through? And I had a friend of mine, or I had a person that was in my network that I reached out to, and I was like, hey, I need to get into a tech accelerator. I want to get into Y Combinator. They're like, no, get into Techstars. I'll introduce you to the managing director. So I end up meeting with the managing director, and they love me as the CEO, and they love my team, and they interview all my team, and we go through this long, arduous interview process. And we end up getting funded by Techstars, right? Which is a really, really big accelerator. Really, really, you can look it up. Techstars is one of the biggest accelerators in the world, probably second best to Y Combinator. And we get in, and this is the biggest milestone of my life, man. Like, I'm like, man, I've really made it now. But in the back of my head, I wasn't really interested in what I was doing. I wasn't really interested in tech. I wasn't really interested in this whole like startup world as much, or at least the startup that I was doing. I wasn't necessarily interested in that. So I end up continuing on, but I'm like just kind of dying down, man. My passion for it is dying down. Everything's dying down. The other thing you got to learn is that in your journey of building a company or building a business, the only thing that's going to keep you going is the passion for the problem that you're solving. The passion for the problem I was solving was not great enough for me to sustain, which is why I felt burnt out every day. You're stressed out, and you're spending a lot of money, right? We got this big investment. I won't even tell you how much it is. It was a 6-figure investment. And, we got to a point where I didn't understand how to manage people. I didn't understand how to manage a team. I didn't understand how to manage people. I was very new to everything, right? So, my CTO, Chief Technology Officer that was building the software, he was managing the Indian team that we had that was building the app, and we were charging hourly. We weren't charging a fixed rate. So they were just taking money from us, We ended up spending like 50, 60, 70 grand, I believe, on like just the app itself. It was insane, right? And so that was just an error on my end as a leader, but I wasn't the greatest leader. I was a good leader when it came to motivation. As you guys know, I love motivating people. I'm really good at that, but I wasn't necessarily the greatest when it came to strategizing for a startup, because it was my first ever startup that I've ever built. And all of these guys, and comparison is the thief of all joy, man. I remember I would always compare myself to other founders, all other of my colleagues that were raising money, and they were raising millions, right? And things were working for them, and they were getting customers, and they were getting on TechCrunch, and I would see my friends getting valued at $1 billion, and I'm sitting here like trying to scrape around with this tech startup, making things work. Things are working, but it's slow, right? We had this app, the app had a bunch of bugs on it, and I'm like, man, we spent all this money for an app that wasn't polished. So I got to a point, man, where, one founder ended up leaving abruptly, went to go do his own thing, messed up really the whole thing because he had the domain, couldn't have access to him, he wasn't responding, so we lost the domain, we lost our emails, we couldn't email investors, we were raising like a seed round of like $1 million. We went through Stonks, which was it's like the Y Combinator of pitching, right? So it was a virtual pitch event that we did through Techstars, and we had $1 million that were pretty much pledged to be able to invest in us and they pledged for due diligence. So they had to come in and do due diligence. And then we found out companies stopped hiring. So not only did I lose my head of product, I'm now losing my CTO because he wants to go to a different company because he's getting paid more because equity is not enough for him. And I have my chief revenue officer who does all the sales, which, by the way, another thing, do not hire people until you need them, right? I thought I needed to hire an executive team of everybody around me to be able to build this company and boost it up to be this big thing. Oh, I have a chief executive, or I have a chief revenue officer. I have a chief technology officer. I have a head of product. I was hiring all these people and giving them a bunch of equity, and it just wasn't working, man. Like, it just really wasn't working. We were hiring contractors, like we were doing a lot. And it just got to a point, man, I just started getting so burnt out that I just lost all love for anything that I was doing. And I realized there was no love in the first place for what I was doing. Again, like I mentioned before, it was all ego. I wanted to be the person who was perceived as intelligent and groundbreaking and a leader by building technology, by being in the technology space, not because I loved it, but because I wanted to prove to people that I was not stupid. This is one of the biggest insecurities I've had, right? I've gotten over it since, but at that time, my biggest insecurity was people thought I was stupid. And maybe it's because I came from the hood, I came from the projects, maybe it was just how I looked, I was jacked, right? I still kind of am a little bit, I've lost it a little bit. I'm gonna get it back when I get to Romania, by the way. I'm gonna do a whole vlog on that, by the way, but back to what I was saying. I lost it, man. I lost the edge, I lost it. And we got to a point, CTO left, head of product left. It was me and the chief revenue officer. We pivoted into crypto. We tried to make this crypto recruiting startup. So we pivoted the idea once again. We got some more investment, but then again, companies stopped hiring. Crypto went into a crash. Everything was bad, and we just broke down. And I remember, man, like I was at my lowest point during that time. I was at my lowest point with this company failing to the point where I have to shut it down. And I remember when I had to shut it down, my heart dropped. And I realized my identity was tied to this startup. Everything about me was tied to this startup. Every time somebody saw me, oh yeah, I'm the founder and CEO of Soko, right? My startup. It was all about this identity I was trying to put on. Yes, I was trying to solve a problem, but it was really the identity and the ego. And when that thing failed, man, I went into the worst depressive spiral of my entire life. I remember it was hard for me to even call the investors that had put money into it, including Techstars, telling them, hey, the company, because I gave them all promises. I'm like, this is going to succeed. This is going to win. I know this is going to win. And I remember, man, I was crying my eyes out, man. I just didn't know what to do. I felt alone. I was in a relationship at the time, but I still felt alone. Right? Because the person that I was with didn't understand what was going on. And I had to make sure everything was good. I had no money in the bank. I had rent due in 2 weeks. That's another story of how I got around that and how I built another business right after that ended up doing way better than the tech company, right? I got into lifestyle businesses, which is what I'm doing now, right? Like coaching businesses, like that stuff I love doing that stuff. But yeah, like I just reflected a lot, man. There was one time, and this is gonna be a little interesting, I wanted to drive off of a mountain and just end everything because this tech company failed. I wanted to drive off of a mountain and end everything. That's how low I felt about myself. So for me, man, it was a mental struggle, like to get out of that funk of failing and seeing all of the other people around me, comparing myself to other people. That's another thing. Don't compare yourself to anybody. Stay in your lane. I'm on YouTube right now. I could be comparing myself to so many other creators who have 3 to 4 times more subscribers than I do, get 3 to 4 times more views than I do on all my videos, but I refuse to do it because I remember when I was comparing myself to everybody else, it took me off track. I lost myself in the process of comparing myself to other people. So don't do that, right? So I compared myself and, I saw myself as an utter failure. I was like, wow, 2 to 3 years of doing this thing, and I come out of this with zero. Everyone thinks I'm rich. Everyone thinks I'm this rich guy because I was in tech and I had a tech company. I went through an accelerator and I got angel investment money and I have articles written about me and stuff. Everyone thinks I'm just this successful person. And in reality, I felt like an utter failure. And I didn't know what to do. I was stuck. I wanted to end everything. I didn't even want to wake up in the mornings. I had no purpose, right? That's what got me deeper into fitness, into my fitness journey. I got really deep into that because that gave me a new sense of purpose. I didn't even want to go back into business. I was doing other things. I was looking at I did high ticket closing just to sustain. That's when I got into fitness coaching because I realized, okay, this is something that I like to do. I like to help people. I like to help people get better. But ultimately, I wasn't passionate about fitness coaching. I hated fitness coaching, to be honest. Just because I just don't like it. I don't like telling people, hey, do your squat this way. And it was online fitness coaching, so it was like, hey, your macros are this. I don't care about that, right? I care about what I'm doing now with this personal brand coaching. This is amazing right now. This is the dream, the dream career, I guess you would want to say, YouTuber and personal brand coach that I could be, right? I have this personal brand company. It's cool to be able to help people. So if you need help with that, again, apply one-on-one. I got you with that. But yeah, man, I lost everything. I lost my identity. I lost who I was, and I couldn't see people. I didn't want to talk to people. I had no money. I was trying to figure it out. And luckily, the online coaching business, I invested in a business coach to help me figure it out, and it worked. And I was back on track. But during that small little month stint, man, I was down and out. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't even want to call my investors. I called them, and here's the one thing I learned, man. The one thing that I learned about tech startups. It's all a gamble. Nobody expects for you to win your first company. No, I had such high expectations for myself that I'd be the best person for my company. Like I would be the first person or one of the few people who succeeded on the first try. I had that big of an expectation for myself. And I just felt like everything went down the water, man. I didn't want to talk to people that I knew. I didn't want to talk to anybody I went to college with. And man, I got to a point, I got so low, and I remember just thinking about it. I remember asking God, like, why me? Like, it really feels that low when a company fails that you knew was going to succeed, that you put everything into. I put everything into this. My identity was wrapped around this, and it failed, right? And so as that was going, and I didn't even mention like trying to start other companies while I was doing this company to sustain at the time. I had a lead generation agency that we scaled it up to 30K a month during that time. And I had to leave that to go all in on this tech company because I really believed that this would be the $1 billion idea. And it wasn't, man. And I didn't do it. I remember I was promising her, I was like, I'm gonna be a billionaire. I'm gonna change the world. And everything flopped, right? And another lesson I learned is that when you're at your lowest point is when you find the clearest direction. When you are at your lowest point in life, when you have nothing, that might be the greatest moment of your entire life, because you will start to see so many opportunities so clearly. You will be open to so many ideas that you wouldn't have been open to before. I was never open to online fitness coaching. I was never open to the online space in general. I wanted to build a business that was a software business. I wanted to be in tech. But because I was down and out, I was trying to find anything that would work. I even got so low, man. And I have some family that are in Florida, man. They do some crazy things. I was looking at going out there and doing things I don't even want to talk about on here, right? That's how crazy you start to get, man. Because when you start scrambling and you have this scarcity mindset, money's low, you see negatives in your bank account, you don't know what to do. and you have to sustain, right? I was in a relationship. I had to sustain that as well. It was hard, man. So I got out of that thanks to God, man, and thanks to just my resiliency that I've been built with, that I've been created with, this resiliency to be able to succeed no matter what. I was able to climb out of that, man, and learn so many lessons along the way, and learn so many lessons for new businesses that I was starting. And that's one thing, that's the story, man. That's the tech startup story. That's basically me in tech. And honestly, I don't recommend anybody start a tech company. That was my first ever company I started, and it was the most complicated business model you could ever think of. It was a marketplace model. So you have supply and demand, right? You have to fulfill the demand, so you have to go find people who want to find talent, and then you have to find the talent who want to then go to the companies, and you have to be the middle person and build the infrastructure. It was a lot. I should have started with a coaching business. I should have started with an info product business, maybe just like a typical ebook or something. I should have started on YouTube, but what I realized is if that company didn't fail, you wouldn't see me on this YouTube channel right now. I wouldn't be doing decently on YouTube the way that I'm doing right now. I wouldn't build an audience. I wouldn't be doing well with this business that I have right now, right? Making 5 figures a month. I wouldn't be doing that if it wasn't for this failure that I had. My identity wouldn't have changed to what it is now, right? And I look at all the people that are still succeeding, and I crack a smile when they're succeeding, but I also understand the game. I understand the startup game is very different. You might see a big $1 billion exit and the person comes home with like $1 million. You might think, oh, that's a lot of money. He came home with $1 million, but he put his whole life into that. And he only got a tiny fraction of what the company he built for his whole career was sold for. It's a cutthroat industry, the startup world, man, and it's not for me. I'm not here to build another venture-backed startup. I'm not gonna do that. If I really build a big company, it's gonna be the traditional way. I'm not going to take tech investments. It's gonna be based off of my cash flow and based off of private investors that I know, and it's gonna be in a business that I know is going to work. It's going to be an essential business. Tech is interesting because you're almost creating essentials. You're creating essentials. That's what you're doing. You're creating demand. You're creating demand for something that is not yet existing. And it's hard. It's hard as fuck. But if you can crack the code, it's good. It just wasn't meant for me. It's another thing I learned, man, especially in business. Do what's meant for you. Do what people are gravitating to you for. Whatever people want from you, give that to them. Don't go try to create some random thing that nobody wants and try to convince people to get it, because that's the hardest part. That's the hardest thing you can do in business, is try to create a category. It's the most lucrative to create a category and win. You look at Amazon, you look at Airbnb, they all created Uber, they created categories. But it takes a gruesome amount of work and a lot of eating ramen and being poor, being completely poor, couch surfing. If you look at all these founder stories, you'll see that they were very poor. Besides Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, all of them, they came from very wealthy families, and they got it. But for people like me and you, we don't have that luxury. What I also didn't realize is I didn't have that luxury that most of the colleagues that I had that financial backing from their family, that had somewhere that they could go back to. Me, if everything fails, I go back to the projects. That's where my parents live right now. And that's why I go so hard at what I do, because I want to get them out. And that's why I perfect my craft so that I can service people and I can actually show results and I can actually change people's lives with this coaching business that I have now in personal branding, because I know once I do that, I'll have the cash flow to get my parents out. I can have the cash flow to get my family out. That's a different mindset, and it's a different strategy. It's not the tech startup strategy, because it takes time. It takes time. And I live on my own. Some of you probably watching this right now, you probably live at home. Or maybe you live on your own and you're underwater. Start something else. Start a coaching business, man. Don't go into tech startups. Don't try to go be a tech entrepreneur because it seems cool. I don't even think it seems cool anymore. I think that wave died down a little bit. But that's my story, man, with this tech startup. It was a very interesting experience. It matured me more than I ever wanted to be mature. It forced me to understand people more than I ever wanted to understand people. It forced me to understand business more than I ever wanted to understand business. It forced me to understand finance more than I ever wanted to understand finance. I understood the investment side of things. I can break down venture capital very well now, right? I have a book back here. You might see everything's empty. I'm gonna go get it actually. I'm gonna get it right now. So I was reading this book. Everything's empty because I'm moving, by the way. I'm not a psychopath, I promise. I was reading this book called Venture Deals, right? And this is a great book if you ever want to like get into tech and you want to understand. I think anybody who's getting into tech needs to understand the investment side before they actually get into building a product, because at the end of the day, you have to understand why people invest. Because when you build a big tech company, you're going to need runway, you're going to need capital. You're not gonna have it. You're gonna have to convince someone with a lot of money to put money into you. And this book helped me a lot. This book helped me understand the perspective of an investor, which is why I was able to attract investors. But anyway, that pretty much sums up this whole video, man. Like, I hope you learned something from it, from my story. I hope you learn more about me. I want to put out a lot more of these raw videos of just my story. I'm talking at you guys a lot sometimes just because you need it. You need someone to motivate you. You need someone to educate you on things that you didn't know. I talk about personal branding a lot because honestly, building a personal brand helped me build that tech company. Me being who I was on the internet, on LinkedIn, posting articles. I was doing personal branding, not even on YouTube. I was doing it on LinkedIn. I was building a brand on there. I was posting videos. I was getting followers. I was getting people engaged. I was getting people hitting me up. Twitter, I built a personal brand. Instagram, I built a personal brand. I started building a personal brand on TikTok, talking about my tech company. I did all this, and now YouTube. So I know a thing or two around personal branding. I'd love to help you if that's something you're interested in. Because I believe that once you build a personal brand, you can build any company. Because people will know you and people will trust you and people will like you and people want to invest in you, or they'll want to pay you for your service or product, right? So I hope this inspired you, man. I hope this inspired you to get into business and inspired you to go on your own journey. If it wasn't for this tech startup, I don't think I would be who I am today. I wouldn't know what I know about business today. And let me know in the comments if you want me to, I don't know if you've even watched this whole video. This is a long 32-minute video right now. I'm looking at the time, crazy. But let me know if you want to hear more stories about business, if you want to learn more about the business stuff. Like, I'm hesitant on talking about that because honestly, I'll keep it real with y'all. I don't feel like I've succeeded like the Charlie Morgans of the world. I don't feel like I've succeeded like an Alex Hormozy to even be worthy enough to give you business advice. I feel like I've succeeded on the personal brand side, which is why I like to do that and help people build their personal brands and stuff like that. But I haven't made millions, to tell you that. So that's just me just letting you guys, just a grounded way of me letting you guys know that I believe I have a lot of business experience because I've done it over the years, but I'm nowhere near a smashing success. I do believe that people learn a lot more from people who failed than people who have succeeded. So I'd love to tell you guys more. So like, comment, subscribe if you thought this was valuable, if you watched here through the end. This is one of my longest videos yet. I hope that you learned something from my experience so that you don't do the same. Share this with a friend who's thinking about building a tech company so that they don't, because I don't think they should. I have a new tech company that I'm doing right now. It's a cybersecurity startup. Yeah, it's really good, man. It's around auditing and crypto, and it's a service-based business. I like service-based better than product-based businesses, way less overhead, and you're really just exchanging services. You're arbitraging service, right? So that's me. Tap the links in the description if you want to apply for one-on-one coaching with me on personal branding on YouTube and monetizing your personal brand on YouTube like I have. Link is in the description. Newsletters in there as well. I download My Consciousness into your inbox. Training Grounds is in there as well if you want just like access to my course when it comes to personal branding, if you want access to a community of men who are thriving and are actually building their personal brands in real time. It's there as well. But I appreciate y'all, man. I hope you learned a lot from this video. I'm gonna catch you on the next one.